Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, the podcast for church leaders who want to make a difference in their communities. We're your hosts, Tony Marr and Bruce Montgomery, and we're excited to be with you today. On this podcast, we'll be discussing the latest trends, strategies, and ideas for effective leadership in small-sized churches. So whether you're a pastor, a ministry leader, or a volunteer, this podcast is for you. Each week, we'll bring you interviews with experienced church leaders who have valuable insights to share. We'll also explore topics like team building, community outreach, spiritual growth, and much more. So if you're looking for practical advice and inspiration to help you lead your church with excellence, you've come to the right place. The Small Church Podcast is brought to you by Higher Ministries. Higher Ministries is an organization that exists to help Christian leaders in the churches they serve through coaching and consulting, all for little or no cost. For more information on Higher Ministries or to find out more about the Small Church Podcast, please visit higherministries.com. Thanks for tuning into this week's edition of the Small Church Podcast. Well, we've been sitting here for over an hour already having a discussion that we didn't hit record on, and so we welcome you into this edition of the Small Church Podcast already in progress, but you're picking up in the middle of a conversation. We're excited that you've chosen to join us, to spend some time with us today. I am Tony Marr, here with my hosts Bruce Montgomery and Robert Kell, and for those of you that haven't been with us for a while, you might be surprised to hear me say Robert Kell. We are excited to announce that starting a few weeks ago, our party of two has become a party of three as we've been anxiously awaiting the arrival of Robert Kell. And really, you know, a lot of it is because Robert has a lot of great things to say. A lot of it is because of his expertise and his insight. But the real issue is that Bruce just travels too much. And I was sick of being here talking to myself every week. And so we do have a full house today where we have Bruce Montgomery, Dr. Bruce Montgomery, PhD Bruce Montgomery, the retired and international traveler Bruce Montgomery sitting to my right. Bruce, how are you this morning?
Well, I'm fine, and after I got out of Israel, I gave up my traveling because my knees couldn't handle it anymore. So I'll be around more often because my wife won't let me go anymore. But
Well, Bruce, that's not true, because I just asked you the other day if you could preach at a church coming up, and you said, no, I'm going to be gone. And I said, well, what about this week? You said, no, I'm going to be gone then too.
Well, that's true. Carol likes to travel, and being retired does mean that we're a little more free to do things. But, you know, I love being gathered with you, Tony, and the conversations we have, and just our friendship. You're just a super friend, and I'm saying the same thing here with Bob. He's going to be a close friend, it looks like, because we share a lot of the same interests, the same passions about the church, about what we can do to help the church, and we're not really talking about helping some church go from 100 to 3,000 in a 2-month period of time. We're talking about helping the church as it is, and to work through church problems that are small church problems or big church problems. But I was telling you as I came in today, I drove down from Kingsport, and I kept thinking, what are the advantages of being in a small church? And one of them is being known. You're known, even if you're not on the staff or preacher. You're there, and people know they know your name, and they care about you, and that's a big advantage. I think that helps build community. The other problem is we don't in a smaller church sometimes access things that could help us, and we've got a star right now here with us, 2 stars with us. You get on the internet and see websites they've designed and things they're doing, and you'll see that they are making things that are appealing for people to come to your congregation, and I'm thrilled to have that.
Yeah, so we teased this a little bit last week in our conversation with Justin Nava. And I want to point out, if you haven't listened to our conversation with Justin Nava, it was the last 2 weeks of the Small Church Podcast. Really incredible content there. Great things. We had some technical difficulties that made the listening experience maybe not quite as enjoyable as you've come to expect, but hopefully you struggled through that, because an hour and a half of your time that would be well worth turning up the volume a little bit and taking notes. You definitely want to have some notes. And in that discussion, we we kind of hinted a little bit at Robert Kell joining us, coming on our team at Higher Ministries in a role that we haven't had before, at least not in the level that Robert is going to be. So Robert, very excited to have you on board with our team here, not only in this podcast, but also in the broader work with Higher Ministries as a new resource that we can offer to churches in several different ways. Why don't you take just a minute? I know you've gone from being a guest on the Small Church Podcast in one of our early episodes to now being host of the Small Church Podcast and working very intricately within what we're doing at Higher Ministries as a whole. So why don't you take just a minute, kind of introduce yourself to our audience, for those of us that maybe didn't listen to the episode a couple months ago. Tell us a little bit about your background, your expertise, and your passion for the church and what you're doing.
Yeah, my name's, like I said, my name's Robert. Grew up in Alabama. It took a long time today for me to decide which of the shirts I wanted to wear to upset you, Tony, the most, whether it was Alabama, the Celtics, the Braves, or the Cowboys.
I'm not in a good mood right now about baseball, so the Braves took it to us.
That was a great weekend for us, but I know the Cardinals got us back for you last night, though. So
yeah, they did.
They took that, but I grew up in Alabama. Kind of long story short, right at the end of my high school years, I was working at a country club, sitting in a video booth, recording the service with our youth pastor, and I literally was planning to go into golf course maintenance. Loved the church, been in the church my whole life, prenatal Baptist kind of thing. 9 months before I was born, Mom had me there. I mean, Mom and Dad. My dad was my pastor a lot of my life growing up, and so I just looked at my youth pastor and. Thankfully, he was kind to me because my exact words were, "So how'd you get this youth ministry gig thing?" And kind of downplaying it, not intentionally, but I was, like I said, late teens, and I just thought, man, this seems cool. And he just spent some time and walked me through, and somehow instead of heading to be in golf course maintenance, I ended up heading into ministry. And so I moved to Georgia a few years later, ended up working at a church there, met my wife. She was one of the small group leaders at the church we were at. And we've been married almost 25 years now. We've got 3 teenage boys, 19, 16, and 15. And then we have a 140-pound Alaskan Malamute, and so I've worked in three or four churches over the last 25 years. About 12 years ago, felt this call to kind of step out of student ministry into the creative space, and so we left the church we were at, moved back to Tennessee, and I went back to school and got a degree in graphic design, and in that space, I felt like I was done with student ministry and God's sense of humor. I became the athletics photographer for the 3rd largest school in the state of Tennessee, high school, and so I was working with middle school and high school students, ended up working for a couple of colleges as well, so that middle school, high school, college space was something that was there. Got to do some fun things, snap some photos of some NFL games and stand really close to guys like Tom Brady and stuff like that, and that was fun for a season. Met some great creatives who deserved to be there. I just got a chance. I just knew somebody at the right paper at the right time to be able to shoot a few games. But I met some men and women who literally have shaped my life in sports and creative. I mean, I still, when I met them and I went and looked at their work, I'm going, I remember the episode of Sports Illustrated that I was looking at when I remember Ricky Henderson diving to second base, and I know the guy who shot that photo now, or I remember this moment and I know the lady who shot that photo. And so it was just a beautiful season of life. In 2019, my wife and I kind of started to step back into vocational ministry a little bit through a home church that we were leading, kind of focused at and just ministering to and caring for the arts and creative community. Over about 14 months, we had about 70 different people sit in, hang out in our house. COVID hit, and things just changed. God opened some doors, and we started to step back into part-time in bivocationally, I guess is probably a better way to say it, into the church world, doing some student ministry. I ended up going on staff part-time at a YMCA in the area that I lived. And a couple months after I went on staff there, working 10 hours a week, doing some marketing and working with middle school and high school students, I feel very fortunate they hired me to be the CEO at their Y. And so I spent almost 2 years there as a CEO. And during that time, good friend of mine was the campus pastor at the church I was the youth pastor at, and he had transitioned jobs. He said, "Hey, I just can't do this dual thing anymore." And again, feel very fortunate. My church asked me to step in and lead that role. So I was the campus pastor, the lead pastor or whatever at my church, and then I was also the CEO at the Y, and then stepped away from the YMCA, and so I'm still pastoring and focusing back into creative spaces. And God connected me and you, Tony, for the second time back, a few months ago, and feel really excited to be a part of what you and Bruce and your all's team and so many others are doing to serve and care for small churches, the local church, and helping pastors succeed. Is it's a really hard world, and as somebody who's lived that bivocational, co-vocational space, that's a really really tough place to be, especially when you've got a family and you're trying to love and care for them, trying to earn and provide for them, and you want to shepherd the people that God have entrusted to you in that moment. So if I missed something, you can tell me. But
No, I think that's great. And we spent last week talking with Justin Nava about the critical importance of the church getting the message out, being able to reach people, go beyond their doors in some new-ish ways, definitely new for a lot of churches. I wouldn't say new for culture as a whole, but new-ish for some churches on ways to get the message out about what they're doing, the opportunities that are available for individuals and families, and a lot of that is what you're passionate about, is helping the church to use creative means of getting their message out there.
Yeah, and Justin did a great job talking about websites and just the importance of having a landing page for people to get to. And I loved the passion of what and it's amazing what a week can do. I'm getting older, and so my mind goes. So, but Tony, you might can help me remember the exact words. But Justin just talked about the power of the gospel over just the power of marketing, and like the goal of the church should be to present the gospel, not to present a building, and not to present just the people or the event. And I think that's so critical and important, that what we do has to have a purpose, and the purpose has to be the cause of Jesus and the cause of the kingdom. And in that, how is our church, your church, the space that you're in, being the church, and how can that lead and impact and help family? Now that does step back to and get into ministries a lot of times, to where inside of family ministries, whether that's nursery, preschool, children's, elementary age or middle school and high school, how are we serving parents? What resources are we providing? How are we stepping in? What are the things we're doing to help parents, teach and present the gospel, and to help their kids navigate and love God and love people well inside of that? And so there are some things that are event driven and stuff like that, but yeah, he just did a great job there. It's really beautiful conversation. Like you said, technical difficulties are always hard. Our church had that last week. I had to kind of tell our church, hey, we've got something going on in our sound system today. Hang with us. It'll get there. So, but sometimes technical stuff happens with all these things, but he just talked about that great. And I think that the websites and social media presence and how we engage culture and community is such a big deal. And then there's just so many resources that I think that churches don't have a ton of resources to give to pay people for things. And sometimes it's just being able to make a phone call or shoot a text or an email. And what we can provide on this end is just, a lot of connections to different things on social media or free resources online that they can grab a hold of that can really help their church market and move forward faster, and give them a lot of time back in their week. Because even with Canva, or if they're using Adobe Express or whatever it is, even inside of those programs that are free for nonprofits, they can get a ton of stuff done, but you can also get deep in the weeds and waste a lot of time. And there's resources that have already created these things that you can just kind of grab, do a quick update, and you can move on and go do what you're passionate about, which is loving and caring for people. My struggle is I love the graphics side, so I'll go find time love for people, and at 2 a.m. I'll be going, I know this is not the right font. There's got to be something better. And so if you're listening to this and you kind of connect with me in that fact, I feel your pain. And so the font will be okay. it probably is only going to deter me and you away from not going to that church, but most people don't care. So just go with the font, go to bed, and love your family well. So.
One of the things that I've reflected on a lot over the last week since our conversation with Justin is if you look throughout the Gospels, look throughout Scripture, Jesus was constantly moving. He was constantly going to people. Now, people flocked to him in droves and thousands. You know, he'd come across the sea and have 20,000 people waiting for him with their posters and their Birkenstocks to get signed and you know, wanting their piece of Jesus and their Jesus story to tell. But he was constantly moving from one place to another, seeking out people, searching for people. And really, the church as a whole has not done a good job of that. We tend to sit still and expect people to come to us. But one of the things that I've been wrestling around in my mind over the last week or so has been that with the technology that we have today, that's a means for us to go to people. That maybe we're not physically our feet on the ground going out, but through our websites, through our social media presence, through the various things that we can do in a digital space, that is us going to people. That is us getting outside of our walls and going to seeking out people who desperately need to hear the message of the gospel.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, to be such a techie, I'm also the most anti-introvert that you will ever meet. I love people. It is my energy. It's my happy place. So the church that I get a chance to lead and be a part of right now, we are very outside the doors, and our worship pastor and I, that is our life. We spent yesterday talking about some events over the next couple of months that it's just how do we get outside the doors. And ironically, the worship pastor at the church I'm at, he actually shut off all of his social media like 3 months ago. So like the guy who is typically the super creative guy on staff has no social media anymore. But for him, it was just a really good headspace. But the struggle and the tension is I talk with friends who we talk about when I was at the Y and things along those lines, we would talk about sports, and I would talk with athletic directors and ministry leaders in the area. And I would be like, man, we're just losing to travel ball. And they said, you're not losing to travel ball. You're losing to moms and dads who will not get off their cell phones to bring their kids to play YMCA sports. They said, kids aren't playing sports, period. Like, it's not the fact that you're losing them and that the Y is struggling or doing a poor job or needs to do this. It's like, we can't get volunteers and coaches. They're like, Robert, we can't get bus drivers. Like, we're paying these people to take kids from point A to point B, and we can't get bus drivers to get kids from A to B. Parents aren't taking their kids to play Little League baseball anymore. They're not taking their kids to these places. And these are like ministry leaders and like pretty high level leadership inside of school systems and things that are talking to me inside of these spaces. And I'm very fortunate, having worked in like the photography world inside of the middle school and high school and college space. I've got to talk to a lot of athletic directors and principals and just different people in leadership roles, marketing and stuff in those systems, and they're just like, this isn't a you problem. This is a bigger problem. And so for me, when I step back and I go, okay, if people aren't coming out, it's great that I want to be feet on the ground and shake a hand and talk to people and be face to face. But if people aren't going to come to that, if people aren't going to look up from their phone, then there is a reality in the fact of that I don't need to stop being who I am, but I also need to be all things to all people in a moment. And so as long as it's legal, ethical, moral, biblical, how can we step into a space which is this social media and online presence? So taking clips from sermons or creating graphics or providing resources that help people to start to ask a question, that start to go, man, I'm seeing this struggle in my child. And when you start to help a parent meet a need that they see in their kid, you're going to see a change. You're going to see somebody start to show up. I love the conversation with Bruce that we all just had recently, kind of standing around afterwards, just talking about a book that we had kind of mutually been reading about raising kids, raising that next generation, and the parents and grandparents, and that responsibility that we have. And it is such a huge, huge number of people right now that I know, people in their 70s, 80s. I bumped into a family within the last year that 92-year-old great granddad is raising 2-year-old. And so we're seeing
Wow.
great grandparents raise kids. They don't know technology. So how can we as the church help them? Because that 2-year-old is going to have a phone in about 3 years. And how do we help them navigate and journey and get through? And so there's just so many opportunities for the church inside of a creative space to make a difference in the community.
That's great. I love it. Bruce, this is an area that you've been passionate about for a while. For many, many years, you've been telling me that within the organization that we work for, Higher Ministries, that we needed to be more active in the digital space. In fact, this show is a byproduct of some of those conversations that you have been pushing me for years to do more in the digital space. And finally, I caved, and we started this show as an effort to reach out into some areas that we hadn't been before, try to broaden our reach, as we were just talking about. I could think back to the different life cycles that Higher Ministries has gone through, from the early conversations in 2005 when we began discussing the need for an organization that sought to help, encourage, coach, counsel ministers and their families. And we've gone through a lot of different life cycles. We've gone through a lot of different ups and downs and different reinventions of ourselves over the years. When we first started Higher Ministries, the thought was we were simply just going to be a ministry to pastors, to ministers and their families, offer free coaching and counseling services for them, offer personal spiritual retreats and renewal retreats for them. And we did that for several years, and we're very successful with that. We were at one point in time doing well over 100 free coaching and counseling sessions a month. But what we began to see over a couple of years of that is that it was a systemic problem, that the vast majority of the men and women in ministry that were suffering through burnout, personal loss, just lack of passion and call, wasn't from anything that they had done, but it was from the organizations, the churches that they served, not having staff honoring systems and not taking care of their staff. And then we begin to look and see some of the shocking stats that unfortunately over the last 15 years have not gone down, but have seemed to go up, of the number of ministry leaders who are walking away from ministry every month, the number of churches that are closing their doors every year. In relation to the number of new churches being planted, we're seeing a steep decline in that across the globe, not just here in the States. And so we began to look at your expertise with a PhD in organizational communication, what you taught at a university level for many, many years. And then my dad, who had spent 25 years teaching organizational growth and as an organizational consultant for Fortune 500 companies and government organizations all over the world. We said, you guys are already doing this in the secular world. Why don't we bring this organizational help, helping organizations discover who they are and develop processes to encourage their staff, not beat up their staff. And so we began a new branch of our organization where we were working directly with the organizations, with the churches. And that really took off to where we were traveling all over for a while. And then all three of us ended up working in local churches again, which kind of pulled our ability to be able to do that. And so we shifted our focus again. And then a few years ago, we shifted our focus yet again to seeing that a lot of the larger churches either had someone on staff who was doing what we do, or they were writing huge checks with lots of zeros to some of the big national consulting organizations that were coming in to do that. And so we said, we see a real miss with the small church, that small churches don't have those resources, the opportunities that some of the larger churches have. And so we shifted our focus to working with with smaller churches. And through that entire period of time, you've continually been that voice in my ear saying that society is going more online, it's going more digital in everything that they're doing. We need to embrace that and jump on that and find a voice in that space.
Well, if you just listened to Tony, you understand one of the reasons why I encouraged us to go that way, because when he was in school, he has a ministry and also a communications degree, and he's amazing at both of them. So what I've seen in working in the church, though, is I've just seen us feel like just keep dropping back. We're not staying current with what's going on in culture. We're just dropping back. And I'm worried right now, and today I've become more concerned about COVID again, because I'm hearing more there's going to be another outbreak and things. But I've just spent the last couple of years watching people come out of COVID. Went to a wedding and talked to two preachers, and one of them, they were both small church preachers, and they both set up their own Zoom or whatever you want to call it, to broadcast their services, and it wasn't successful for either one of them, and one of them finally just quit. And I said, "What happened with the people in your church?" "Well, I don't know. They just lost out altogether." And I'm looking now at what do we see if we're looking at the church and we're looking at what's going on. Social media, how are we going to use this to meet the things we see that are coming? There's a truck coming down the road at us, and we need, as churches, to be able to avoid or to encounter and use that truck to be effective witnesses. And we were talking about grandparents, too. I'm working right now at the church with a program being intentional as a grandparent. And I'm going to say to you, the small church leaders, you need to be intentional as a church leader. And if you're an elder, you need to be intentional, helping the leadership. If you're a preacher, you need to be intentional and love those people you're with, and try to figure out a way to take everything to the next step. And that doesn't mean we're going to go out and go crazy, but it means we're going to kind of keep pace with what's going on. And small church is effective, but we need to make sure that we give our best to it. I think sometimes small church is where I'm hanging out till I get that opportunity to get into a big church. And I grew up in big church, I told you before, and 3,000 members and 1,800 on a Sunday. All the big church is a bunch of small churches that meets under the same roof. And they have to have Sunday school classes and all kinds of different kind of things just to maintain what you have as a small church, which is community. I used to go into the church and I saw a lot of faces of people, and I'm very friendly, so I'd say hi to them and talk to them and know nothing about them, go on to the next person. But in a church where you know each person's name, you know something about their history and something about their issues, you can actually help each other. You can love each other through those kind of things. But what are we going to do socially? What are we going to do as COVID comes back? Even if it doesn't come back, what are we going to do? Our church has a lot of people online who are still haven't transferred back. And maybe some of your small churches have that same thing too. You've got people who are watching a service online, and you're doing fine with that, but that's all they're doing. What can you do? And this is where Robert can come in and help you and help us. What can we do creatively to step beyond just putting on a service out there and expect that to be everything? Okay, we satisfied our obligation. We put on a service. People satisfied their obligation. They showed up for the service. Is that all there is to it? What can we do for those people who show up for that service? What kind of things can we provide for them? We've got to reinvent how we do church somewhat. And that may frighten some of you. I know some people will frighten terribly, but if we don't keep up, we'll end up laying in the ditch. So I went on and did the PhD because I was ministering and being busy with that, but I wanted to help the church. And there's a thing called church growth science, and church growth comes out of the organizational leadership type things, And I looked at that, and Tony and I would look at those kind of things as we looked at churches and try to help churches. And those are just principles that you can use. But we just need to flat out love people and find how to do it and promote that we're doing it so that they're going to listen to it and understand it. And that's your part of the thing, because yours is the encounter part. Mine is the theoretical part. We can set things up, but Tony's both. And Tony is a marvelous storyteller and can help a lot of people if you want to call in and get a hold of him. But Robert, I'm just looking forward to it. We've talked and we've had an agreement on a lot of the issues out there, and I think you've got the skills and experience to really help people. So that's what Higher Ministries is about. We're about helping people, and as a church, don't just ignore that. Well, we broadcast a service, and that's all we need to do. I think we can offer you some other options to that, and maybe even help us create new things that are happening. But it's important that I still believe the church is the most powerful force on earth. Scripture says the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. That doesn't mean that the gates of hell or Hades are withstanding an attack. It means they are on the attack, and they are winning the battle against Satan. I think that even though it doesn't look like it in our society, God is still in charge, and in the organizations we have and things, and especially the church. And if we can stand up and be His in a way that the world will listen to today, then we're going to be able to make a big impact. People will come, but you just have to begin to communicate in ways that they'll understand, and even through media, lovingly communicate with them. Don't go out and condemn everybody, but lovingly give them information, lovingly give them hope. And that's what I think Higher Ministries is about as much as anything else, giving hope. When we started this, I think what was the average lifespan of a minister in his career?
Less than 5 years.
Less than 5 years. Did you think that kind of dropout rate? Can you think of anything else in the world with that dropout rate that's still alive? So God is doing something, and we're not always helping Him with it, but God's doing something, and the church is the answer, and we want to make the church able to be the best it can be.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that we see such a high dropout rate among ministry professionals is that we go to Bible college or seminary, and they teach us how to write, craft, deliver a good sermon. And then we think that that's what life is going to be. We get our job in our first church, and we get there and realize there's also finance that takes place there. There's counseling that takes place there. Really probably should have gotten a business degree instead of a Bible degree because of all of the different requirements. There's interpersonal and communications that has to take place, the relational dynamics, the leadership dynamics that take place in a church that we're not prepared for. And so we get into this place where now we're having to create a bulletin, we're having to put together a prayer list, we're having to manage and balance a budget, put together an annual budget, we're having to work with leaders and develop and train leaders when we ourselves are needing to be developed and trained. And we find ourselves doing all of these things that are taking away from what we originally thought the ministry was going to look like, and we realize this is just too much, I'm ill-equipped, I can't do it, there's not enough hours in the day. And we walk away and go sell insurance or sell cars because it's defined. This is exactly what my role is in this. We do a lot. One of my big passions is the Clifton Strengths Finder. I know that right now the buzz is the Enneagram. Everyone wants to talk about the Enneagram, and I think there's great value in it. I'm trained and certified in the Strengths Finder, and so it's what I use a lot. And the big premise of the Strength Finder is we want to get you to the place in your life where you're spending 80% of your time in the areas of your strengths, the things that bring you passion, that bring you energy instead of taking energy away from you. There's always going to be things that we have to do that we don't enjoy, that we're not good at. But if we can get to a place in our life where 80% of our time, personally and professionally, is in the areas of our strengths, what a great place to live. And the sad realization is so many of you out there listening right now are spending hours and hours and hours every week poking around on Facebook, looking around on your website, trying to figure out, what do I do with my church website? We're starting a new series that I would love to have some graphics. Let me download Canva and see what I can poke around at. And you're not good at it. It doesn't bring you strength. It doesn't bring you joy. It doesn't give you energy. It's taking you 10 times longer than it would take someone who's skilled at that and who loves to do that. And it's just burning you out. And instead of spending time on the things that you do enjoy, that you do feel called to, you're wasting away behind a computer screen doing something that's just making you frustrated. And at the end of the day, you're just settling for something that you're putting out, that your people are seeing, that is not communicating the message that you want it to communicate. And so, Robert, that's where you come in.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that's your skill set, that's your passion. You love doing it, and you're doing it for the kingdom of God.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to interrupt you there. That is so well said, because, like, and people are going to find this odd. The church I serve at is a part of a network of churches, so we have 3 campuses in our region, and I'm the campus pastor at one of them. I don't even edit my own sermon clips. Because, like, when you step into and you look at the time that you have, I'm bivocational. I have so many hours that I can give to, like, there are tasks, like you said. There's things we have to do in any job. There's tasks in the church, and so where I spend my time. And by the time you write sermons and all these other things, like, our lead pastor actually clips my stuff. That's not his happy place, and it is mine, but he's full-time. He has more time. He has that window. And so sometimes you have to delegate things you're really passionate about to do some other things. But like the sermon series, we've got 4. We've got a lead pastor, 3 campus pastors, 3 worship pastors. I mean, between all these campuses, we've got all these staff members, and we get our series graphics from Craig Rochelle's Life Church. I mean, like, we go in and we find graphics and do things, even sometimes with talented people with tons of skill sets. We understand the value is not in sending one of those staff members off to go write a new idea or to do something that's really unique, because nothing new under the sun. So let's use what's available. Let's use good stuff that good people have put out and be able to step in and go. And so, and I'll just tell you, some of that for me has come down to, I have to kind of put aside my ego. I have to put aside the fact that I feel like I need to be creative, that I need to be inventive, even if I'm kind of copying someone else's idea. It's better for me to use that person's idea than it is for me to take and spend 10 hours trying to really hone in and find, a series graphic, a bumper video, or create, a series graphic, a bumper video, slides for Insta stories and TikTok and all these other things that go. It's about being smart in that space. And that's where I believe that myself and we can help small church pastors especially.
So let's dive into that a little bit. Your new role with Higher Ministries, to come alongside churches and church leaders and help them in some of these areas. What are some of the things that you can help churches with?
Yeah. So my degree, when I went back to school, is in graphic design. So I definitely know how to, if they're looking for me to do some things, I know how to do graphics. This all sounds snooty. I hate saying this stuff, but I did win a few awards with some photography and things, shooting mainly sports. But I know what a good photo looks like. I know how to do those things. And if it's something that, photos and video and creative spaces, I can create all of that. I understand social media platforms and how to get things on there. And I'm pretty good at finding resources that can help do that. The other thing that I think that from the higher, with Higher Ministries and how, sometimes churches don't have resources and budgets to be able to consult in those things. Hey, you've got somebody in your church that can take photos. I'd love to look at your photos, and I can help you understand, hey, here's 2 things you could probably do that would help that photo be more engaging. Because as bad as it sounds, people are not going to stop, most likely are not going to stop of the really wide photo you took with your cell phone of your youth ministry that night, unless they're trying to zoom in and count how many people are there, or they want to see if their kid actually showed up to youth ministry when they said they were going to. I mean, it's really, there's things of, if you want to create engagement, if you want people to stop scrolling, to spend 3 seconds, that maybe they're willing to read, how do you put together a little reel? How do you put together photos that flash through? So, being able to help people understand. And by the way, cell phones, iPhones, those types of things aren't bad. I mean, they're shooting unbelievable megapixels now. They're great resources. You can really create the art you need with what's in your pocket. It's just, you've got to sometimes know how to do that. So knowing how to do those things, how to shoot video, how to create those photos, and then what's free resources. Hey, I actually want to create. It doesn't take me a long time. Cool. Here's places you can get free photos that you can use for, that are, royalty-free photos or royalty-free music and things like that you can grab and put in and use underneath. And I know that Canva and a lot of these places have put that stuff in there, but if you're looking to create a video inside of a site, there's just a lot of things that people can get a hold of. So yes, I can, and those are things that we can talk about if somebody needs or wants me to create those things, whether it's a website or social media graphics or sermon series graphics and all those types of things. I can help create things like that. We can talk about that, or if they're wanting to do it themselves, we can definitely provide that conversation to consult and be in that space.
I think that's one of the great things about technology now, is that if you're listening and you're not here in East Tennessee where we are, but you're out in California or you're in Utah or in North Dakota, Robert is available to help you. Now, if you're wanting him to come in and shoot a video for you, that might be a little difficult if you're in Canada somewhere, but he can help you with so many things from a distance, and he's there to take a look at your material, tell you what you can do better, maybe tweak some things. So much can be done now digitally and over the broadband airwaves. I'm not even sure if that's a correct term there. Techies are listening right now and rolling their eyes. But there are so many ways that we can come alongside of you and help you to better reach out to your community. One of the things that I loved from the conversation with Justin last week, and it was something that you brought up, Robert, is so many churches now, and I'm seeing this over and over and over again, are abandoning their websites in favor of Facebook and social media. And Justin spoke to that a lot last week. We had a lengthy discussion on how, if that's what you're using as your primary means to communicate what you're doing and get information and inspiration out to your people, you are failing on so many different levels. I know one of the things that you would love to help churches with is helping them to either create a website from scratch if they don't currently have one, or creating a new one if they've got a website that you scroll down to the bottom and it says copyright 1989. So that's something that you can really come alongside and help out with.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Like inside of that, one of the other campus pastors inside of our network messaged me and a couple other guys the other day, and he had found this resource, and he's like, hey, the video that is a TikTok video that basically just said, hey, do you know when you're on Amazon for 2 minutes and you look at something and then you go to your social media and that thing starts popping up all the time, would you like to help it's exhausting, it's scary, all this AI stuff is nuts. I'm about to terrify you more. But this guy's like, hey, within 3 minutes, I can help your church start popping up on people's radar. And literally, we watched a 3-minute video, and we were able to kind of instill that same SEO, that same mindset, those things inside of our church website, so that when people start searching for churches in our region, in our area, we pop up, and then all of a sudden, when they're scrolling through, they looked for a church, we'll start coming through on their social media feeds, and those are things that they're free. They take a few minutes, but and my thing is, the phrase "no good deed goes unpunished." I feel like that as much as I love tech, sometimes deep in those things, you start on something and you get to a place and you go 4 days later, it's like, I should have just paid somebody $12. And so I love the tech stuff and it's where it is. But that's like, fixing the dishwasher or plumbing. Like I should have just called a plumber, because there's no way that the 4 days I have spent and the angst of no dishwasher, a frustrated wife, irritated boys that they're having to wash dishes, and all these things that are
then
going
when you
on.
do get it done, your dishwasher's leaking.
Yes.
So you're going to end up calling
Yes,
the plumber
because
anyway.
I've broken something else
Yeah.
in the process of doing it, and that is the struggle. There is a real struggle there inside of we can take and click, like we have. We use a thing called Bark on our boys' phones and things, and so we love Bark, and it's great. It can be a touch
Sensitive.
intense.
Yeah. I use Bark as well.
Intense at times. And so one of our boys, his phone just wasn't working, and he was super chill with it, super as chill as he could be. I mean, like, he never said a word. He wasn't upset. Never yelled at anybody. He was just like, I just can't do this. I can't. And I was like, hey, can you do? And he's like, my phone doesn't work. And I'm just going, wow, this is complicated. I mean, how do I get into? I mean, he's a driver. I need to know, like, what's going on. And then one day he was in, and he was looking at the settings with my wife, and he just kind of said, oh, hey, this is the problem. And he clicked it, and he went. And so sometimes you've got to know what the problem is, because doing the right thing, you can click a button that puts you into a space that something's not working. And there is nothing worse than being ready to step into a space where your service starts in 10 minutes and you've spent all week trying to get to a place. Saturday night at midnight, you finally left, you went home, or you closed your laptop, you were sitting at home going, okay, this is when I take to church tomorrow, and I'm going to plug this in, and we're going to live stream this, or we're going to show this video, or we're going to play this here, and you feel like you've got everything right, and in the process, you clicked something else that is going to block. Now your ProPresenter won't work. And there's nothing worse than being in that space and kind of in that. And I think that's a place that we can provide some help and some sanity and kind of care for the local church, because, I need a plumber sometimes.
So basically what we're saying here is all of you listeners out there need to have Robert on speed dial because he can help you out. And so if you're looking for help, encouragement, advice, just another set of eyes in areas of graphic design, photography, video, your website, your tech stuff, your social media, if you want to figure out how to be more effective in those means, you can now go to higherministries.com and contact Robert straight through there, and he is a resource that is available to you. Hopefully you will take advantage of it. We are about out of time for today, and so we want to thank you for listening to this edition of the Small Church Podcast. We're so excited to have Robert Kell, a part of our team, not only on our show, but also in the work that we're doing with Higher Ministries. If you want to find out more about how you can connect with Robert or any of us at Higher Ministries, visit higherministries.com. On behalf of Bruce Montgomery and Robert Kell, I am Tony Marr. We invite you to subscribe to the Small Church Podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to it, and tune in next week for the next edition of the Small Church Podcast. Have a great week.